Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Roundup. So, Naughty Dog have responded to the leak situation. Guerrilla Games have seemingly also got the go-ahead for a Horizon Zero Dawn trilogy that seems to be gigantic in scope. Then Riot are celebrating yet another expansion in the same week that they're also promising to eradicate in-game harassment and try to make their Vanguard system seem a bit more palatable to players. Then CD Projekt Red have hit another milestone, one that, well, has caused quite a bit of drama indeed. First though, April is drawing to a close, so if you would like to support our efforts and get our April loot from the art team over in Patreon, well, here it is. So first, we've got our send up, drop something, send up of the space science fiction, inspired by the TBC classic rumors, then the Troll Month, the Raptor, Jungle, and the Sword Snake sticker, and of course our pins, which I so gracefully drop. Here's two examples of past ones. So it's the Priest pin pre-order this month. So thank you, just with YouTube falling into oblivion, and you know, this being a small channel with a team, you know, it running at a loss, that has been saved directly by you guys. So thank you. Yeah, that's what's going on there. With that said, let's get into the news. Okay, so first off, the Naughty Dog situation. Honestly, there's not that much to cover here. If you want the full dive into just discussion of it from yesterday, you can do that. But they have issued a statement. Basically, it's a boilerplate statement saying, you know, they're disappointed, they're sad at what's going on, but of course also that the game will be available in June, June 19th to be precise. That is when it is coming out. So there was that statement. Neil Druckmann, the game director and VP of Naughty Dog, also said that he was, you know, heartbroken for the fans, heartbroken for the team, but they're still excited to ship the game. And that basically is it. Now, of course, that's all that they really can say, right? Like, literally, what else can they do? They can't really comment on the rumors or the leaks because, I mean, the leaks basically are the game, so they can't really comment on that. And then there's things like the working conditions that's been the, you know, the other thing people have been talking about here. Well, can't really talk about those in a PR-friendly way, can they? Like, there's just about no way they can do that. Remember that right after Jason Schreier dropped his article about crunch at the studio, and you even had, like, some ex-staff publicly talking about what the studio was like on Twitter, you know, what did Neil Druckmann do? Well, he just tweeted about being really proud of the work the team is doing, right? So a bit of a whataboutism from him. So I wouldn't expect to hear any serious or relevant statements from them. Suffice to say, I think that's basically it until this game comes out. We'll maybe hear about the person who leaked it, maybe what legal troubles they're going to get into, which, I mean, they certainly will get into legal troubles. But yeah, that's essentially it for the story. I think very unlikely we're going to see that much else till the game actually comes out. There's one final tidbit sort of related to this, and that is that Ghost of Tsushima is actually now 17th of July. So, yep, you can get Last of Us Part 2 in June, Ghost of Tsushima, which I think at this stage I'm definitely more excited for that one. That will be in July. So, that's your big Sony releases. And with that, let's get into Riot. So these Riot updates, I'm going to keep them quick and just roll through them. So do you remember all that Valorant anti-cheat stuff? Well, they're not removing Vanguard, the tool, but they are adding some features and tools to aid in transparency there. Basically, it's going to alert players whenever it actually blocks anything, and it's going to get a system tray icon that will allow players to disable it at any time. Now, Valorant won't actually run until the PC is then, you know, rebooted and Vanguard is brought back up, but it does give people a bit more control over it, which, I mean, absolutely is the right thing to do. They're also getting a little bit more upfront with their communication. I mean, the post literally says, "So no, we're not selling your data to China." Now, I do understand people's skepticism there about whether they are doing that because of the Tencent ownership, but we got to be realistic here. Look, if there was even a whiff of that, the US government would shut them down and would make it not be available in the US. Just look at Huawei. The US government had concerns about them. You cannot get a Huawei phone in the USA. So I think if there was any credibility to them actually selling data or stuff like that going on, then yeah, I'm pretty sure the US would just crack down on them. Anyway, with that said, we're still going to be heading east because they have opened up a support studio in Singapore after apparently being blown away by how well their Hong Kong studio has done. Now, Singapore is famously open for business and sort of politically stable, albeit at the expense of it being a rather authoritarian state, but economically it is a massive success story for the region, very open for business, so it's no surprise that the likes of them, Sony, EA, and Ubisoft Ubisoft are all setting up shop there. And then finally for Valorant, they're also investing into long-term solutions to curb any in-game sexual harassment that's going on. And I mean, like, yeah, we've all been online. Creepy stuff does happen. It's clearly not a good thing, right, that it does happen. I think ultimately when you've got a large enough population, there is just going to be a percentage of people with, you know, mental or personality issues. And yeah, those people are going to externalize their emotions in ways such as that. Somehow, I doubt that's a problem Riot are going to be able to solve themselves, given that it's just a widespread human problem, right? And not really a specific game issue. Now, that said, it also doesn't help that their anti-toxicity efforts in League were often draconian, and I'd say more importantly, like they were just ineffective. They didn't really work. And were also, for a long time, being led by somebody who actually turned out to be a little bit toxic themselves. Anyway, that's it for Riot. Let's move on. Next up, I'd say some good game news that maybe eventually will make it to PC as well. So multiple sources have confirmed that Sony have greenlit a trilogy for Horizon Zero Dawn. Guerrilla Games allegedly had always wanted it to be a series of games. They even penned a multi-part script. Now, Horizon Zero Dawn, of course, went on to sell like 10 million copies, so it seems like an absolute no-brainer that Sony would want, yes, another one for the PS5. So Horizon Zero Dawn 2 entered development soon after the original's release and is said to be a gigantic game in scope. It's also supposedly going to be having co-op. That's actually a long-held ambition for the devs. It's something they actually wanted to have in the original game. It's something that Sony wants as well, but the co-op was apparently scrapped so they could focus on just making the core game really good. So overall, I'd say this is good news for Horizon fans. Certainly if you like Killzone, I think Guerrilla are probably not going to be making Killzone content for quite some time indeed. That's pretty much what that studio is going to be doing for the next while, and certainly with Horizon Zero Dawn coming to PC, I mean, that should help act as an advertisement for the PS5 if, you know, the sequel is not like a day-and-date release for the PC. Gotta wonder if that's a part of Sony's plan, but anyway, there you go, they're heavily investing in that. Okay, next up, the drama. So CD Projekt Red's CEO and co-founder Marcin Nowinski is officially a billionaire, and he's the 9th richest man in Poland. He owns over 12 million shares in the studio. The studio itself was recently valued at over 8 billion, and that is before Cyberpunk 2077 releases, though who knows what that will do to the stock. I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about, you know, buy the rumor, sell the news later on. But anyway, going back to the story, like, while other companies get their money through things like microtransactions and loot boxes and stuff, CDPR's continued success shows that actually you don't really need to be psychologically manipulative and exploitative in order to be successful, right? The studio are vehemently against microtransactions, as evidenced by their games, what they've actually done. You know, if operated by another company, let's just say Ubisoft, Witcher and Cyberpunk could have easily strung the player along for, you know, new cosmetic gear, crafting resources, XP boosts, paid weapons, whatever, right? You know, The Witcher 3 did have paid DLC, but that was so, like, substantial, like, it was basically another game set in that world. So, you know, what we used to call an expansion pack. CD Projekt Red, they make their money from quality, and that's earned them a good reputation with their community. So by virtue, you know, of their recent releases and how they treat their players well, they're revered in a way that other companies can only dream of. And that is why they can be valued at $8 billion despite only releasing like one game every 5 years. And that's why their CEO can be actively celebrated online for becoming a billionaire, which I'll admit is a bit funny, a bit strange. And yes, it's kind of funny and ironic that he's being lauded, you know, as that on the Cyberpunk subreddit because, you know, it's a billionaire leading a studio that's focused in a game that's, you know, in a genre that's about economic inequality and stuff. So that's funny for some people, and I think it's funny for me, but it's infuriating for others. And I think a problem here actually is a lot of people, I'm sorry to say this, just don't know how the economy works, or taxes, or value, or net worth, or any of that. You know, there's loads of these boring, unemotional, real-world things that people just don't understand. And because of that, people get really angry at news like this. So let me break it down. Net worth is not liquidity. Marcin doesn't just have $1 billion in his pocket. If CD Projekt Red's stock dipped by 20%, so too it is net worth. Right? That net worth is almost entirely dependent on the performance of the ship that he is steering. A few years ago, his same number of shares, 12 million out of the company's 96 million, that was worth 5% of what it is now. You know, it's also worth saying that, you know, in markets, you buy the rumor and sell the news, which might seem a bit odd to people, but, you know, right now, gaming stocks are a strong safe harbor for long-term investors. They're doing really well. There's a lot of hype for Cyberpunk. So it seems to make a lot of sense that it's doing very well as a stock, right? This stuff's all been good for gaming stocks. I think CD Projekt Red's specifically. And I suppose we will just have to see once the actual, that's the rumor being bought, but once the news happens, will people, decide that's their time to sell, or will they just buy up more and, the hopes of future earnings? So it's hard to know, really, but it is no surprise that this, this has happened, right? This is actually simple economics. This billion is just the value of the stocks that he owns. And you may say, why doesn't he give that stock to his staff? Well, first of all, why? I mean, they accepted their job role with the compensation package that their job was listed as having. Second, do they want 12 million of their 96 million shares to be, to be traded, right? That's got implications. And ultimately, like Marcin and his co-founder, they founded the company in 1994. 26 years later, he's still there. Turns out the guy and his co-founders built a business over a long period of time. They made wise decisions over that time. They hired good people, built strong teams, and helped steer it to success. I mean, is there really that much to be angry about here? Especially since this was done by selling people quality products at a reasonable price, free from psychologically manipulative microtransactions, such as those that can be found in Activision or EA games. There's not much else to really do here other than, look, I'd like to dive into their bonus structure for their staff and things like that. And certainly, I will say this, if there's one thing you want to criticize them on, it would be the culture of crunch that they certainly had in the past and may or may not still have. I think that's fair game, but ultimately, some of this stuff is just economic realities. And if you don't think that somebody should be allowed to have ownership of an asset that can be valued by a market at a certain value, which is fundamentally what's going on here. I'm sorry, but you might actually need a revolution or something like that to actually make that not happen. But the thing is, even if that happened in some, a particular country of interest, well, there'll be another country that's more open for business and, the capital would just move. That's called capital flight. So, I think the anger at that, I do understand where it comes from, but it just does hit this kind of wall of the real world and how just the boring day-to-day stuff actually works. So anyway, look, that's my take on that. Let's move on to the next story. So next up, tech giants Tencent have purchased a controlling stake in the Chinese streaming service Huya to the tune of 262 million. But this move has also resulted in Tencent taking a dominating position in the market. 2 years ago, they invested over 460 million into the company the same day that they poured 632 million into the rival service, I think Douyu. So Tencent basically now have a controlling stake in both services, as well as their own gaming-oriented streaming platform in eGame. So it's kind of funny because Tencent haven't really expanded into the market. They pretty much are the market now, which it's fairly interesting that level of stuff can happen, and certainly. If that was to happen in the US, right, let's just say that Amazon bought Twitch, and then, let's just say that years and years and years ago, instead of Google purchasing YouTube, Amazon did, which, wouldn't really make much sense for where Amazon were back in 2005-06, I guess. But if you just humor me there, and you ended up in this situation where Amazon, they owned YouTube, and they owned Twitch, and they had YouTube Live as well, you might actually start bumping up against antitrust and stuff like that. But I suppose over in China, it's a pretty different situation there. So yeah, it's interesting that Tencent are so dominant. And certainly if you look at their investment portfolio and in NetEase as well, just across all of gaming, not just particularly in that region, they certainly do have a diversified global portfolio, I'll put it that way, and I think they're well positioned to just capture the overall just increase in the gaming market, which, it certainly is an interesting situation, like Tencent owning that much of gaming. Maybe that's something that we could do a report into at some stage. Though, to be honest, doing a deep dive report into that would probably take like a week of research, so if we do that, it'll probably be in quite some time. Anyway, let me know what you think about that, and of course all the other stories today down below. If you want to chip in and help us out, because YouTube ad revenue certainly isn't doing it now that it's halved, all the Patreon stuff seriously does help, and I'm also just really happy that it's a way that you can help us, but also, we can get stuff from our game art team. Now, this isn't stuff from our game, it's just, what the art team does for Patreon, that, we can get that to you as well. So, thank you for watching, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.